What the heck does this sway button do? If you've ever asked yourself that in College Football 26, this is the video for you, because today we're going to take a deep dive into this mechanic. By the end of this video, we're going to know how often the sway button works, what happens when it does work, and show you a real example of when we could possibly use it. Now, for starters, we do need to separate the questions of how often does this thing work and what happens when it does work, because I have data in both directions and they're very different. For starters, how often does swaying a recruit work? Well, I recruited an entire season with Illinois and Memphis, two very different tier schools, and we swayed 87 different recruits in total. And just in case you have no idea what it's used for, people are using the sway mechanic when they want to flip one of these red X's into a green check mark, because we know that that's what you want to be hard selling people on, is with those green check marks. So there are times when if you can flip one of those red X's that you have a great grade on into a green check, you could have a very strong hard sell. But okay, how often does it actually work? Well, over the 87 recruits, we saw that when you do the sway with two green checks in order to try and flip one single red X, it works about half the time. And when you only have a single green check and you're trying to flip two red X's, which they say in the game in the little icon is going to be a lower success rate, we saw that for those 30 times, it worked about 20% of the time. Now, because this is a sample, I did include those confidence intervals, which means that we are 95% confident that the true success rate, like the success rate that EA programmed, is somewhere between those black bars. Maybe it's as high as 60%, maybe it's as low as 40%. Honestly, gut feeling with how simple some of this stuff has been, I think it's probably right at 50% and we just happen to get close. But for now, let's just assume that when you're trying to sway with two green checks to get that one red X to flip, it's a coin flip. And if you're doing it to try and get multiple red X's to flip, well, it's more of a long shot. Now, you're probably wondering if there are certain characteristics of the recruit that would make the sway more likely to work. For example, what if the two green checks had fantastic grades? Or maybe what if that one red X had a fantastic grade? Would that be more likely to work than if that red X was an F and for some reason you wanted to convert that to a green check mark? The answer from what I have at hand is no. There might be a tiny difference in terms of the grades that you have on those two green checks. Like you might have somebody that is slightly more likely to convert, but the difference is not large enough for me to really care. At the end of the day, I view it as a coin flip, whether those two green checks are A pluses or Fs. But now that we know how often it works, what actually happens that week when you do the sway mechanic? Because recruiting battles are intense and every week matters. Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that when you compare the exact same recruits, trying the 30-hour sway on them and trying the 30 hours of just regular recruiting actions, you see much more influence that week when you just use 30 hours of regular recruiting actions. To prove this, every single time I did a sway on a single player, I would create a different save file and then go and just throw 30 hours on that player. And then similar to past videos, we would measure the amount of pixels that we increased on the actual bar. So I am very confident that today, right now, if your goal was to make that bar move as much as possible this week, you should not be swaying. You should just take 30 hours and go do regular recruiting actions. But obviously, the goal of the sway is not to have some massive boost in this week. The goal is to flip one of those red X's so that you could hard sell with very strong grades down the road. And you're probably wondering, Max, those letter grades really drive the impact of the hard sell and the soft sell, right? Like if you have straight A's, it's going to be a massive hard sell. Does that happen with the sway mechanic? For me, the answer is not really. If you had two A grades on those two green checks and you compared it to having two C grades on those two green checks, there is a little bit of a difference, but it's like so small that I don't really think much of it. Just like how I view the likelihood of the sway mechanic working as kind of like a coin flip, I also view this as a one-time hit where you would have been about 50% more effective if you just did regular recruiting actions. But obviously the goal of the sway mechanic is not to get some massive boost in influence this week. The goal is to get one of those red X's to flip to green so you could hard sell for the next few weeks and have a ton of success. So that brings me to a real example of when I used this just yesterday. Let's talk about Joey James. Now, Joey is a 4-star recruit and we are a very low tier school, Middle Tennessee State. And we were the first people to go after Joey James when nobody else was really interested. And because we got that big lead, I was shocked to see a big school like South Carolina get involved and start really gaining on us. Like if we zoom in and look at those bars, they are going to catch up and they are going to get Joey James, especially because we identified that this was his hard sell. And just like in past videos, if you were to convert those letter grades into numbers, we would see that we are not in a good enough spot to hard sell here. But check out this one. If only he had 3 green checks on this pitch, the number of points for his hard sell would increase from 18, which is below the threshold, all the way to 25, which is well above it. 25 points, that's a great hard sell. So this is when we tried the sway. At the time in the video, my mindset was, hey, we are going to lose this recruit if we do nothing else. If we just sit here and send the house every week, we will lose. So yes, it's only a 50% chance that this is going to work. And yes, I know we're going to take a one-time hit this week, but if it does work, I think that we can hang on to this lead and get the recruit. Luckily it did. The week 4 visit ended up being a win for us, so we had a lot of impact there. And Joey James came to Middle Tennessee. And with everything we know, I think this is the one example where I actually do think I might still be using the sway. It's when I know that if I got this one red X to flip, that I could have a much better hard sell, and I need it. If I'm outperforming other schools on a recruit, I have no reason to take that one-time hit in influence that week, especially if I'm swaying to unlock something that's not that much better than the existing pitch. So unlike the hard sell versus send the house video where we have a very defined formula, this one is really more of a judgment call. I think you can determine whether or not you should sway if you can answer 2 key questions. Are you going to lose this recruit if you don't do something differently? And second, is there one red X that if you could just get it flipped to a green check mark, it would unlock a hard sell that is way better than the hard sell that you currently have? And I'm not talking about going from a C+ for the 3rd green check to a B for the 3rd green check. I don't think I would do it there. I mean, this one changed a D- as one of the 3 green checks into an A-. If it's that big of a difference, then maybe it's worth the risk. Now, if you want to see that Joey James example live and everything else I know about recruiting as of today, I filmed a 54-minute full season of recruiting. I'll let the YouTube thing show it up on the screen or whatever. You're welcome to click on it. Otherwise, I really appreciate the time. Hopefully this was helpful to learn a little bit more about the sway mechanic. And if you have any other thoughts, as always, leave them in the comment section. There's a lot of smart people in there. All right, thanks guys. Peace out.